You want to get back to some quarterback talk and some rapid fire?
I do. I always, the rapid fire is my favorite segment because we get an all encompassing, finish after being very centric, Notre Dame centric. So it's always fun. So yes, long answer, yes.
All right. I'm throwing an audible at you with the first question. If this was professional football and you're Notre Dame, would you have taken the trade? Would you have traded Tyler Buchner to get Sam Hartman for 1 year?
Hmm. Yes, I would. And I think a good overall analogy or comparison would be what the Jets just did with Aaron Rodgers.
Was thinking the same thing myself.
And do you maybe lose a couple assets here and there? Sure. Are you rolling the dice? Sure. But the good thing about Hartman compared to Rodgers is he's younger, right? Like Aaron Rodgers, there's maybe concerns that how much does he have left in the tank? This is Sam Hartman in his prime. This is Sam Hartman doing everything he can to get to the NFL. So I mean, it's like a win-win on both sides. You have a quarterback who has proven experience, is a proven gunslinger with the ball, and has every aspiration to perform and succeed because, at the end of the day, yes, it's about the team win, but it's also about Sam Hartman getting to the NFL. So I have no doubts that he's going to be putting on his best performance the entirety of the season.
It's funny that you said you use the analogy with Aaron Rodgers because the reason this question got on late is because I was sitting watching, I don't know if it was NFL Network or NFL Live or what it was, but of course they started talking about Aaron Rodgers and trading the draft picks to get Aaron Rodgers. Is it worth the price to get maybe 1 year out of Aaron Rodgers? And that's what made me think of this, because you're going to get 1 year out of Sam Hartman, just like the Jets are maybe going to get 1 year out of Rodgers. They could still get more, but they're really only guaranteed one, considering he's 39 and he was flirting with retirement before this whole trade thing happened. I mean, he's flirted with retirement for the last couple of years, but still. So that's what made me think of this, and it is absolutely worth the price, because if you have the chance, whether you're the New York Jets or Notre Dame or any other team, to put yourself into playoff contention, to be a true contender, then it is absolutely worth it to make this kind of deal. Because I think somebody brought up earlier, and I hadn't really even thought about it in this context, like you're not, if you're Marcus Freeman, you're not guaranteed anything. Next year is not guaranteed. Just look at any playoff team in any sport from year to year. You are not guaranteed the same kind of success that you just had from 1 year to the next. And when college football rosters are constantly turning over, if you think that you can put yourself in the position to be in the playoff and to be a true championship contender by adding the most experienced quarterback in college football, I absolutely think it is worth that trade-off. Again, it stinks that you lose a talent and a good player and a good kid and all that stuff like Tyler Buchner, but I think it is definitely worth that trade-off to go out and get a guy like Sam Hartman, because I do think that it puts them in the best possible position to be a college football playoff contender this season.
Same. And now it is my turn to throw you a off-script question. I don't know if you
Okay.
and Vince talked about this yesterday. I hope not.
All right.
It is blank that Max Scherzer was ejected from a game.
What? We're going straight to baseball? We
for
can't say.
No, for sticky stuff after the umps made him use rubbing alcohol, and rubbing alcohol with rosin is proven to be sticky. I couldn't wait to get this one off my chest.
You know what? I was watching that game when it happened. They made him switch gloves. He went into the clubhouse, got a new glove, came back out. They checked it, and then they showed him in the dugout, like what he was doing. That that the pitch, whatever the pitch thing is that they're allowed to use, the electronic thing. Like they showed him taping the pitch thing in his glove hand and all that stuff. And it looked like maybe that's where the residue came from. It obviously came from something else. Look, I don't know. Like, it's not like this guy doesn't have a history of it. Now, you should have saved the baseball question for a little bit deeper in rapid fire, but obviously you have an answer to this. So what do you think?
I just think overall it's just the underlying issue I have with baseball right now, and it's the consistent need for umpires to feel like they have to have some sort of interjection within the game. And at first, I wasn't believing, Scherzer, and then you go into the, on Sunday Night Baseball when they're going through the tutorial of, what happens when you mix rosin with rubbing alcohol, and like the guy can't even open up his fingers without them, sticking together. So again, this is a self-inflicted wound by the umpire crew, and then of course Scherzer gets tossed out for doing what he said to do. So to me, that's what I was just getting at. I'm just tired of the umpires feeling the need to constantly interject themselves and have some sort of underlying role in the game. Your role is just to call balls and strikes, fair or foul, safe or not safe. And I just think that too often that these guys want to be, they want their impact to be felt, it seems like.
Right. All right, back to some Notre Dame football now. Greg says quarterback depth is only a weakness that's perceived on the outside by armchair quarterbacks. Last year, they had an extremely limited pine at QB2. This year, Notre Dame has extremely talented QB2 and 3. And I wanted to piggyback this. I guess it's actually the same guy. Greg says, do y'all think Gino has better odds of improving the quarterback depth than Tommy Rees?
Yeah, I here's what I would say. If you looking at last year and you say, okay, do we take Drew Pine, no Tyler Buchner, and Steve Angeli as the backup, or do you take Sam Hartman, no Tyler Buchner, and Steve Angeli as the backup? Which one are you swapping for? You're going to take this one. I mean, this is basically the same situation as last year, but you have a way better upgrade at QB1. So I would take the trade 100% of the time. And I do think that Gino is going to be better at developing quarterbacks because that is what his specific role is. Tommy Rees's role was be the offensive coordinator, be the quarterback developer, the wide receiver developer, all get the whole offense to run together. Well, this year they have one guy solely focused on, running the offense, and another guy solely focused on the development of quarterbacks, and a guy who has a proven track record with developing quarterbacks. So I think that is definitely going to be better for Gino to develop quarterbacks in the long term.
I think so as well. I mean, look what he did with Desmond Ridder. It worked out pretty well there at Cincinnati, and like, granted, that is one guy, but that group got him to the college football playoff. They were the first, obviously, non-Power 5 team to make it into the playoff. And I completely agree with everything that you're saying because of the fact that this is a guy who's going to work solely with the quarterbacks, and he's going to go out and be able to recruit them as well. I'm really confident in what he's going to be able to do with this group. And just look at what you've got coming in next when you've already got Kenny Minchie here and you've got CJ Carr coming in. I think they're going to continue to recruit the position well. The depth takes a hit this year when you lose a guy like Tyler Buchner. It's going to look different now, but again, it's on from right now. Like, the challenge now for, Guidugli and Angeli and Minchie is to wage that battle for QB2 and to have one of them ready to be one snap away once the season starts. But as I saw somebody bring up also, I mean, the schedule sets up where if Hartman does his job and everyone does their job in those first couple weeks of the season, you should be able to get whoever the number 2 quarterback is some reps early on in the season. How meaningful, you don't know, but at least get them reps out there. And I think that can be important as well. Do you agree?
I do. And it was, again, kind of going back to, what I was saying a little bit ago is I think at this point you kind of become, what Steve Angeli is about. And I think that the focus should be on if Buckner's leaving, we know Hartman's our guy, and we know, we're going to need Hartman and obviously the big time leverage games. I think there needs to be something said for developing Minchie and getting him out there as much as possible. And, that assumes that they take care of business how they're supposed to in games that they're supposed to. So I would be all aboard of seeing someone like Minchie, kind of stepping into that quarterback 2 role and getting a lot of attention at the quarterback 2 role.
Double dip here from Roger Dodger. He says if Hartman can win more than 9 games, then it's totally worth it. And then he follows that up with, I should say, regular season wins. You think Tyler Buchner could have gone 10-2? Do you think Buchner could have gone 10-2? I think that there's a chance, but again, it's the big 3, right? Like, could he win at least one of those 3 games? Ohio State, Clemson,
Well, that
USC,
assumes that he
and then
doesn't
not
make any
lose, and
mistakes
then
to
not
cost you
lose a
any of
game
the
that
other
you're
games.
right, exactly.
I don't think that Tyler Buchner could have gone 10-2. I think he could have, but I think the chances are like 25%, and I think 9-3 would be a more realistic, like 75% chance.
Yeah, I think I'm probably around there. I think that he could have, but I think a lot of things would have to go right. Like almost everything would have to go right. With Sam Hartman, there's a much greater margin for error with the level of quarterback that you're going to have, level of quarterback play you're going to have compared to Tyler Buchner. Again, that's why they went out and got Sam Hartman. So I think Buchner could have, but the odds are much greater that Sam Hartman will than
Right.
Buchner could have. I think. Yeah. Like what were the odds that you gave again? Like 75%?
For 9-3, and then like 25% for 10-2.
Yeah. I think that I would agree with that. So with Buchner entering the portal today, the Irish, as we mentioned earlier, have had 4 players go in the portal in the last week. Started with Caleb Johnson, then Lorenzo Styles, then Prince Kollie, and now, of course, Tyler Buchner. So scale of 1 to 10, what is your concern level right now?
My concern overall is about a 3. And again, it's you never want to see top players leave, first and foremost. But I think as I've kind of hinted at before, the only one that kind of stings more than any of the others is Tyler Buchner, and it's just for the fact that you want solid quarterback depth, especially after what happened last season and having to stick out with Pine and etc. But Prince Kollie and Lorenzo Styles, it's just they weren't proven fits. And there's a lot of talent behind them that's younger and more hungrier and eager. And so I don't find that overall as something to be concerning. I think it's actually very positive that we're seeing, again, I alluded to it as kind of like the trimming of the fat. Like, I think Marcus Freeman is ultimately getting in here his level of players across the board at every position. And whether or not that makes you feel uncomfortable or not, that's on you. And for people like Styles and Kollie, their chances ultimately kind of pass them for guys who probably want to be a starter right now. So I don't blame them for going out and probably finding an opportunity. Like Kollie and Styles are both going to go somewhere where they're going to play a good percentage this year, and that wasn't going to happen at Notre Dame. So
yeah,
it would be different if we're talking about, Logan Diggs decided to transfer, or Benjamin Morrison decided to transfer, or maybe Nolan Ziegler decided to transfer, like guys who were showing a ton of promise and already getting a lot of playing time.
Yeah, guys who were knocking on the door or already there. That would be a lot more distressing than what now again, like throwing Buchner into the mix does change it a little bit. So, I put it maybe at like a 2.5 or a 3. It is still fairly low because the other guys were guys who were lower on the depth chart, having a harder time rise up the depth chart and make a case for playing time. Again, I understand what Buchner is doing. He has to look out for himself. It stinks for Notre Dame, but if he has the chance to go and be a starter versus being a guy who comes in some package situations or whatever behind Sam Hartman this year, that's in his best interest. And again, he's going into his junior year, which means he's draft eligible a year from now. And whether or not he realistically turns into a quarterback who can or will be drafted a year from now,
it's your best opportunity to get there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He has to start getting experience, and I understand that for him. Now, at the same time, Chi-Town asked, do Tyler, Styles, and Kollie have no one looking out for them. Their NFL aspirations are 50-50 at best. A degree from Notre Dame is a guarantee. And that is very true, Chi-Town. But, like these were all highly rated recruits coming in. These weren't even, like 3-star guys who, have, like over, like outperformed their star rating and that kind of stuff. These were guys who all came in and who expected that they were going to see the field, I think, in a pretty quick amount of time. And, like that was the thing that Marcus Freeman talked about with Lorenzo Styles was the chance to get a Notre Dame degree is not going to be there for him now. And obviously for both of these other guys as well, Kali and for Tyler Buchner, now it's not going to be there for them either because the fact that they're leaving before they get their degrees. It's a trade-off, obviously, that they're willing to make. And I just think that guys who truly have the NFL aspirations, they get blinded, to the bigger picture. And it's understandable because they want to go out there and they want to be NFL football players. So I understand it, but you still make a good point because that degree is always going to be there if you have it. And the connections that you have from Notre Dame as well, for that matter.
Right. And I think for maybe some players with lesser kind of promise or, ranking coming out of high school, it's a different story. But I mean, these guys were basically, told out of high school how good they were, and they got recruited by lots of people. And when they're not playing, I mean, that's the overall goal. Like the window of being an athlete oftentimes closes a lot faster than what you realize. And these guys are just trying to get in and soak up every ounce of opportunity that they have. And so whether or not they get the Notre Dame degree, which is a very valid point, because that would be something that weighed on my decision, if I were in the same shoes. I just think it's ultimately what you've been talking about. These guys know that there is still a chance at the NFL, and they're going to do everything they can to soak up that opportunity, before their time is up. And there's nothing to say that they don't, they've started a lineage of credits at Notre Dame. There's nothing to say that they don't, come back and ultimately maybe finish up, even if the football window closes for them.
Sure. And, like Stanford would make a lot of sense for a guy like Buchner, because of the fact that you have similar academics and all that kind of stuff. You get to play in the Pac-12 and everything else. I want to get Corey's question in here for you, Jess, because he says your hat is fire. Can't find a good Notre Dame hat like that in Arizona or even online. I just shopped for some. And now you said those were limited edition hats. Is that right?
Yeah, and I saw there was a few other people kind of talking about hats in the chat. I am your hat guru, first and foremost. I have lots of hats. I buy hats just about everywhere I go. I was in Atlanta this past weekend, picked up a Braves hat at Truist Park. That was really cool. But yeah, this is a 47 brand hat, and they released these only for Notre Dame, Alabama, and Michigan. 200 for each teams. They were like kind of like the historic lineage. It was a certain line of hats. But yeah, I picked up one of these, and this is the very first one of 200. So I felt pretty cool. This hat did cost me around $100 though, for what it's worth.
Wow. Holy cow. Are you kidding?
Yeah, but it is 47 brand. And Derek, I know you're just a hater because everyone tells me how great it is every time on this show. So I appreciate all the support from everyone out there.
Many others like it. T-Roy brought up a good point, back to, like what I was talking about, the games at the start of the season. Should have been able to get the backup some quarterback some meaningful reps against Marshall and Stanford last year too. I mean, very, very valid. But if you can't do it going into the season, Navy and Tennessee State up front, and the MAC after that, then there are going to be a lot bigger issues.
But this is,
about.
I mean, he brings up something that I always hate getting into with Notre Dame is like they never perform against the bad teams quite how they're supposed to. And so it's like, if it's always one thing, to be like, yeah, we should do this or blow these guys out, or, this is a good game for our, backups, but it just seems to never happen. It always like comes down to maybe just like a 14-point game and they get that last touchdown towards the end, or, So to me, that's just something you can't bank on as much as you would like to see it happen for the reasons of getting someone like maybe Menchie or Angeli important snaps, for long term down the road.
So shifting gears a little bit, still talking Notre Dame, but a little bit different topic. Marcus Freeman was asked about the possibility of ditching basically what's an intra-squad scrimmage, the blue gold game at the end of the spring, and play an exhibition game against another team instead. And here's what Freeman had to say about that.
Absolutely. A chance to play another team, it would be good. You're not going to – it would still be similar to a spring. You're not going to show everything. You're not going to want to get the guys you're counting on that have experience probably injured. And so you're still probably going to, hold back a couple guys. But I think to play another opponent would be pretty cool. Logistics on that, and that's for Ron Paulus and Jack Swarbrick to figure it out. But it would be different, but it's no different than almost like an NFL preseason game.
So do you buy or sell the idea of playing another team, playing an exhibition game at the end of spring?
I'm 100% buy on this because I believe that there's something to be said about going out and hitting someone else other than the same guys that you've seen for the same 15 practices throughout the spring. I just think competition-wise, you'd get a little bit more. I think you'd see a little bit elevated play, guys playing with a little bit more passion, stuff like that throughout the game. And I remember when I was in school, there was another college within our, city limits of good old Adrian, Michigan, and we always wanted to play them in a spring game, essentially, because just think of like what you could do if, the two local colleges within a small city.
That could have been a big seller. Yeah.
Right. And then you're playing each other, and we wanted to put it underneath the lights. And there was always, like when we were, and this is just, this situation for example, but we'd always see these other guys out and about when we were going out to different clubs and stuff. And they would always, there was always end up being jawing back and forth of just guys being like, oh, we would beat you, or, we'd beat them. So to me, it was always something that could have been a fun opportunity and really just kind of, bring the community out and have a good time, because I think that you would see guys play just a little bit harder, a little bit more competitive, etc. if you're going against guys that you haven't been practicing against all spring.
Here's a valid point. Derek says, sell. Why risk injury in a game that doesn't matter versus a team that thinks it's the Super Bowl? And, that very well could happen. Like I've seen charity softball games, turn into, the same kind of thing. One side thinks they're playing in the World Series and the other team is just out there having fun. I think at the very least, if it's a controlled scrimmage, like even if you're not playing like full rules game, like you see in the NFL during training camp and stuff like that, where they'll hold, they'll do different stuff and they'll hold the joint practices and stuff like that. I think it's worth it just to line up and hit somebody, from another team that's not your own. There's always going to be risk because it's football, but I do like the idea of it. But, again, maybe I guess there could be a little bit more risk because of the fact that you would be bringing in someone who, it means more to them than it means to you.
Right.
And like Marcus Freeman said, you're still going to keep it pretty vanilla and, all those different kind of things. And you're going to hold out guys anyway, who might already be injured and stuff like that. You're not going to play everybody in those kind of games. Yeah. Like Chi-Town said, you could play mostly the backups if you want. Like it could be an opportunity for the 2s and 3s to go out there and show what they can do, because they already have their own closed door scrimmages anyway. Like they had the Jersey scrimmage a week before the blue gold game. And that game actually was, 1s versus 1s and 2s versus 2s and that kind of stuff, where they actually did, line more guys up. We didn't get to see any of it, but that's the way it rolls. So the NCAA is going to institute 3 rules changes to reduce the number of plays in college football games this season. They're going to run the clock after first downs with the exception of the last 2 minutes of each half. Teams are not going to be able to call consecutive timeouts, and a penalty will carry over to the second or fourth quarter rather than playing an untimed down at the end of the first and third quarter. So in other words, if you have a penalty on the last play of the first quarter, rather than playing untimed down, you carry the penalty over into the second quarter. So do you buy or sell these changes, Jess? The idea, by the way, is to cut down on plays in the game. It's not like they want to cut down plays because they're going to be expanding the college football playoff and adding more games next year. So do you buy or sell it?
I buy this, and I buy it simply because the pace of game will go up, and that's my biggest, complaint. Sorry, complaint was slipping my mind, but biggest complaint with college is just the pace of play. Sometimes it's just really long and drawn out. And, I know that, not everyone's an NFL fan, but when you go to the NFL the next day and the game is just moving along, it's like, it's just brutal somehow how long some of these college games take sometimes. And so when you can speed it up, get through it a little bit faster. And it's not that I not enjoy what it's at now. I just wish that it could go just a little bit quicker. And I think that this is just a little bit of a boost that would help with that.
T. Roy says sell, buy. So he doesn't like the clock running after first downs. He doesn't like teams not being able to call consecutive timeouts, but he does like the penalty carrying over. I think at a minimum, the fact that the clock running after first downs, I love it. They're still going to stop once you get inside 2 minutes of each half. They're going to stop the clock on first down. So that, that will help out teams, like 2-minute drill and that kind of stuff. But I love the fact that we're not going to have stoppages after every first, like they had initially proposed, even after, like incompletions, you keep the clock running, and they didn't go for that. So I'm glad they didn't go for that. But I like the fact that they're doing this because, again, like now they're saying the ultimate goal is to cut down on plays, and I do believe it. I think I saw the average number of plays in a college football game is like 185, and it's like 25 more than an NFL game, for example. So if you're already playing a 12-game regular season, obviously, a lot of schools have the conference championship games, then you got bowl games, and now you're adding more levels to the playoffs. You're essentially going to be eliminating about one game from the schedule over the course of, a full schedule like that. So I do like it because if college football is going to continue and the schools are going to continue to stuff their money with billions of dollars from the expanded playoff, you can't ask the players to go out there, and play the equivalent of an extra game over that course of time when they're not making a true salary. Now, do we know that some of them make NIL? Of course we do, but it's not everyone is. They're not all out there getting full salary. So I like the fact that they're cutting it back like this by doing this. It's a simple change, and I think it's going to be good for everybody. By like just the first down thing, I think everyone's going to like it when it's all said and done. Okay, so there's a proposal in the SEC to impose harsher penalties for field storming. The highest or the harshest proposal that they're looking at is taking away a home game from a team whose fans storm the field. So, for example, Tennessee fans stormed the field after they beat Alabama last year. So, if this proposal were to pass, Tennessee would have to give up its next home game against Alabama. So, like, they play every year. So, Alabama would end up with 3 consecutive home games in the series since they play every year. So, do you buy or sell this idea?
Oh, I sell this idea. I think this is a ludicrous idea, and I know that there were talks, and prior about how to make this a punishment. But listen, the only reason that this is a concern is because schools are complaining that to replace a goalpost costs too much money. Well, you know what? If a team is storming the field and you're taking down a goalpost, I'm sure that game was probably sold out, and you made a ton of money on concessions. It's just, the excuse of that it costs money or whatever, and I'm just not for it. To me, a part or a tradition of college football is when you beat another team, that you're not supposed to, a huge upset. You storm the field, you celebrate, you tear everything down, and you have a good time. I think it should be like I think schools should want something like this to happen because they're monumental wins in your program history. So again, I hate this idea overall.
It is not surprising that it is the schools like Alabama. It's basically the teams at the top of the conference. I think like Alabama, LSU, and a couple others. Like, it's the better teams in the conference that have proposed this. They're going to have to, like, everyone in the conference is going to have to vote. I just can't imagine, the teams from the middle down voting for this for the very reason you're talking about. Like, if you get Alabama or LSU coming into your place and you beat them, you want your fans to celebrate. Now, is there risk? Of course, there's risk that, some people can get hurt relatively, like you never want to see anyone get hurt, but the percentages of people who have been seriously injured, in this kind of stuff is relatively low. You do want to take into account, yeah, and like Derek says, punching a female in the face, an SEC tradition, and that happened in that Alabama-Tennessee game as well. You do want to make sure that the opposing team can get off the field safely. That is important. And maybe the way you set up, your field where your students, because it's going to be the student section that's going to be doing most of the storming of the field. Maybe you have to reconfigure like where you put your students. Maybe they have to be on a different side of the field, to make sure that the opposing team has access to their locker room and they can get off the field and all that kind of stuff. But I think, again, it's mostly the better teams who are proposing this stuff, and I don't see it flying, and I don't think that it should fly. I think it's one of the even though, yes, is there some risk involved? Yes, but it's also one of the funner things about college sports is when you get the fans, the students, storming the court, storming the field, whatever it happens to be. So we're 2 days away from the NFL draft. Michael Mayer, Notre Dame's only chance to be a first-round pick. Cowboys pick at number 26. Now, I'm not making this all about the Cowboys, but do you think Michael Mayer is off the board by pick 26? And then the other side, if he's still on the board, do you think Dallas takes him?
So I hope that he's off the board because I think that he's way better than falling to number 26, and a lot of teams could use him. But if he falls to 26, that's a blessing in disguise. And I think that someone like the Cowboys should soak that up immediately. To be short, I think his inline blocking goes along with what they're trying to accomplish with an already solid, offensive line, run game, etc. And then you throw in the fact that it's another option for Dak Prescott with CeeDee Lamb. I think that's great because I think what Dak was missing last year was just another valuable target to go to. And that's what, Michael Mayer could give you is just a security blanket on a lot of those short down plays where he can just use his body and strong hands to box out and grab the ball out of the air.
Like, it's all over the place where people are predicting Michael Mayer. You've seen like some having him going around 21.
I've seen 21 like consistently, like 18 through 21 is like the very common range right now.
Yeah. They've got him going to the Chargers. They've got, but others have Kincaid ranked ahead of him. And I think that some of it will depend on where Kincaid ends up going. I definitely think Dallas should grab him if he is still there at 26. I've seen others, having Cincinnati a couple of picks later. I think it's like 28, 29 where Cincinnati is picking. They've got Mayer going there, but I don't think that he's going to be on the board still at 26. I think he's going to be picked before that. Excuse me. There's a lot of smoke screen out there.
I think the 15 through 20 range is where he's going to fall.
Yeah, I think so as well. Mark says 87 doesn't matter. He's going to be a millionaire very soon. That's exactly right. And Jason says he hopes it's the Cowboys or Bengals. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he ended up with the Bengals. That would be good for him. It'd be close to home for him, and it would be good for the Bengals as well. I think he'd have a really good chance to be in the Super Bowl pretty soon if he ends up with Cincinnati. He's not going to have that in Dallas. Fill in the blank. The player who is the biggest X factor in the first round of the draft is blank.
The biggest X factor in the first round is Will Anderson, and I'll tell you why. Because depending on where Will Anderson goes or where he is selected or kind of what happens around him, I think is largely predicated about where he goes. I think if we see Will Anderson, basically what I'm saying is where Will Anderson is drafted, you'll see either an influx or not of quarterbacks drafted. I think like he's kind of the chess piece that will determine if there's a domino effect of all the quarterbacks kind of getting soaked up around him. And I think like a team like the Texans, like they should take him with the 3rd overall pick and then maybe get, one of those other quarterbacks, towards the back end with their 2nd pick around number 12 overall. But again, I think that he is going to dictate a lot of what happens with these quarterbacks. So that's why I'm saying he's the X factor in the top 10 because he's going to dictate a lot of things around him.
I can see that argument. I'm looking at Bijan Robinson because like there's a lot of people who have fallen in love with Bijan Robinson and like is he going to go to the Eagles as high as number 10? Most of the experts don't seem to think that he will, but like I could very easily see the Eagles sitting there and basically not talking about Bijan Robinson and ended up taking Robinson at number 10. And you combine him with Jalen Hurts and that offense becomes even deadlier. And like, does he go at 10? Does he fall? Like how far does he fall? Because there's the whole thing about do you take a running back in the first round? Do you take a running back that high? Would a team be willing to trade up to try to get him? So like I think he's the X factor because of the fact that he's the running back, but also because he does like if this was 20 years ago, Bijan Robinson would be talked about as a top 5 pick easily, but he's not. And so that to me is what makes him the X factor is could he go as high as number 10 to the Eagles? Are some teams going to possibly even be willing to trade up to get him because of the kind of special talent that he is? He's the only running back, I think, who has a legitimate case to go in the first round. Like I don't think you even think about Jahmyr Gibbs down at Alabama. I don't think he's a first round running back. Robinson is it for me. Jess, I think we've made our way through it tonight. Good stuff.
It was a long one, and with the Buchner news dropping today, that it is always a good thing to have a hot topic to talk about.
Yes, it is. Well, we appreciate you being with us tonight. Hit the like button on your way out, and of course, subscribe, rate, and review. Appreciate all the feedback and input tonight. We will be back mañana for another edition of IB Nation Sports Talk. Jess, I will talk to you later, and we'll talk to everybody else later as well. IB Nation Sports Talk.